Really great to meet you guys. As Esther mentioned, I've been at HubSpot for about 2.5 years now, and I was at Salesforce for 5 years before that. I actually fell into technology completely accidentally for personal reasons. My background is in history and international relations, and I always thought I would work in the EU or the UN or some sort of big internationalization. But I married someone who had a real startup dream. And so we ended up moving to San Francisco for him to start his own company, which he was successful at, which is great. And that's where I converted myself into technology. And that's how I joined Salesforce, essentially. So definitely not someone that came from technology and not someone that like studied anything to do with technology, but used the skill set I had learned in undergraduate, graduate, working in consulting to transition over to technology. And I've sort of fell in love with it and have stayed with it ever since.
Wow. I actually didn't know half of that story. So thank you. That's super interesting. It's wonderful how things can happen in life that kind of leads you to new paths. And you have a huge responsibility at HubSpot right now with managing multiple teams across the globe for customer success. And we're now in a new normal. How should businesses think about tying diverse teams to customer success?
Yeah, so I think around the globe, 2020 has been a pretty insane year. It feels like many years. Year between not just COVID, but also racial justice really being thrown to the forefront, and it's really had us think a lot about our diversity within our CS teams. And there's a couple of things that we really think about when it comes to diversity. For us, for the first thing is like you've got to have a team that really reflects your customer base. So that's become really important. Like customers care where they buy from, and they've got to see themselves in the products that they buy. And so if you don't have a team that reflects that diversity of customers, honestly, I think customers are going to sort of question that more and more. You're seeing it a lot more in retail brands that are thinking about their model photo shoots and having more diverse photo shoots. That's definitely true for us too. So all sorts of diversity of backgrounds, geographies, industries, you name it, we're really looking to tie that to our customer base. The second piece is for us to be successful as a CS organization, we spend a ton of time actually collaborating, right? A CSM might own their book of business, but every time my team is on Slack, they're asking their peers, questions and problem solving. It could be about an industry that they never come across. It could be a part of the product they never come across. And so actually having that real diversity of thought and a background is a huge help in finding better solutions for our customers to help them grow better. So really, we've tied diversity very closely to our success, because that's how we help our customers and solve for them in a more sort of holistic and scalable way.
Got it. And could you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by diverse teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think diverse could mean a whole bunch of different areas. At HubSpot, we're really focused on our racial diversity. It's an area where we've wanted to move the needle for a long time, and we've done some good efforts, but honestly, we haven't been as good as we want to be yet. So it's been a big focus for us this year. But to be honest, I think about it in many different dimensions. When we hire our team members, we look at do they come from different parts of the US, for example, for our US team, different regions within the US? Do they come from different industries? We don't actually hire, in my small business team, we don't hire that many people who come from a CSM background. We hire a lot of people who come from an account management or different customer facing background, which we love. And we look for different industries because we service lots of different industries. Gender diversity is always a big one. Educational diversity, so we really do try and look at different axes and build out the most varied team that we can find.
I'm sure our members will have some questions around this, as this is such an important topic, especially right now. So really, really good to see that HubSpot is really leading the way in diverse teams. So And how do you tell this diverse team of amazing talents, how they should prioritize customers during an economic downturn like this?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really hard when you come to downturn. Like, where do you focus your time and effort? Because resources are ever more limited. We know that customer experience is really important to customers. We surveyed customers in April 2020, so really when the pandemic was sort of just beginning to kick off, but in in some ways in its worst peak part. And we asked a whole panel of people, like, what impact has COVID-19 had on the importance of all these different variables below? And it's clear that customer experience matters, right? In the top 10, you've got cared about customers and community, puts customer first, great customer service, transparent communications, great customer experience, right? Like, throughout your company, if you're not thinking about that customer and how to treat them the way they want to be treated, how to give them that amazing experience, you're not going to retain them. So that was really eye-opening for us, is like in a crisis, like that actually matters even more than price, which actually is like lower down on this, like has low prices is in the bottom half of this. The other piece that's really important, I think, as you think about customer retention, is it's actually really expensive to acquire new customers. Like, I'm sure everyone on this webinar knows that, right? When you're in the world of startups, you know how hard it is to acquire that brand new customer. We found that it's between 5 and 25x more expensive to acquire a new customer than it is to retain an existing customer. So, that I think are two sort of big reasons where even if it's hard to focus on that customer retention piece, you really do need to think about it. For us, the way we thought about it with COVID is two main areas. We've thought about one, financial adaptability. As soon as the pandemic hit, we of course realized that customers would need financial support to get through this. Like, they wouldn't be able to continue necessarily be able to finance their HubSpot instance. So we put together a customer relief fund to help our customers with short-term relief. We had a pretty set amount that we could actually give away, and we put a lot of guardrails to help our CSMs work with their customers to understand what was the best solution for them in the short term. So that was a really big piece that I think every customer was looking for. The second piece is around education. As soon as we got through that initial just Mount Everest of financial help, we understood that our customers needed help to adapt their marketing or their sales strategies or their service strategies. And so we put out a lot of education for both our customers, but also our customer success teams and our sales teams to help essentially better consult based on the current environment. So I'll give you an example. We had a company that was a cycling apparel company. They typically marketed to their sort of major retailers. They never typically went to direct to consumers. In April, they actually shifted and decided they would market for the first time to consumers. They had the lists from their retailers. So they actually did a marketing campaign with a specific discount code with the help of our CSM. And at the end of that month, they had the biggest marketing campaign and sales campaign they'd ever had. Right? Like, cycling was one of the industries that if you actually got in there and gave the right message, you could do really well from. But that was one of many examples of how we kind of helped our CSMs just slightly pivot the way they consult and help our customers to make them more successful given the circumstances.
That's fascinating. And I'm sure that a lot of our members are wondering, when should we think about building customer success teams?
Yeah. So that I'm obviously biased. I'm going to tell you should hire a CSM really, really early.
Yesterday.
Yeah, right. Your second hire, basically, after your product. No, I think if you're looking for kind of stats on understanding when you should hire, I think it's important to point out a 5% increase in customer retention can actually increase your company revenue by a huge amount, between 25 and 95%. So definitely thinking about that first hire sooner rather than later is really important. That said, it is dependent on the business. So you have to kind of look at your business, at your product and your customers to understand when do you need your first CSM or your first CS team. Something I think about is if you have a really technical product, either it's hard to integrate with the rest of the tech stack, or it requires a pretty sophisticated user to kind of get their heads around, and a lot of onboarding, I definitely would think about making that hire soon, because you want to get your customers up and running as fast and successfully as you can. Right, so that's a good reason to hire a CSM pretty early on. I think another reason to hire someone early is if you find that you have like super large chunky customers where, like, you know, you might have more than 10% of your revenue is held by 1 or 2 customers. You really want someone who's going to be very engaged on the stakeholder engagement, who's going to understand how do I keep my like everyday user using the product, but also bring in the decision maker and keep them engaged and happy with the results that the product is using. That's another good reason. On the other end of the spectrum, if your product is more like really high velocity, sort of easy to buy online, easy to install and get going, and it's about having a really long tail of lower spend customers, I actually say you might want to invest more in your support team so you can like help with that troubleshooting and like deal with that sort of high productivity needs. And you might have more investment in like a marketing resource to help with online content or knowledge-based articles, rather than having like a single individual talking to one-on-one to customers, right? So I think those are some of the things you may want to think about. I think either way, you know, the minute you get to like 1 to 2 million ARR, or you have like a couple of like big customers that are managed, that are making up a really chunky set of your revenue, you definitely want to have like a human in there to help with how do I manage these customers? How do I get them to renew? How do I make sure they're using the product every day?
Celine, I'm sure your daily life is about thinking about your customers and how better to empower them. How should businesses today empower their customers to empower themselves without human interaction or service?
Yeah, so at HubSpot, I manage one of our big segments is our lower spend customers. And what we found with those customers is they don't want to speak to humans, right? They are really well educated, they're very demanding, but they want the answer when they need it. If that's 3 in the morning, then sure, they should have it at 3 in the morning. So we've really had to get smarter on actually scaling and giving them more resources. What's actually really interesting is we found that that's true for a lot of other companies, right? We found that on-site chat volume with our customers using Service Hub has actually increased about 29% since pre-COVID averages. And that was, we looked at this number sort of back in May, June, so it's probably even higher now. So, you know, I think there are a ton of different resources you can put out there for your customers around be able to look at knowledge-based articles, using online chat, which is super productive. You know, having a blog with like potentially like really thought-provoking, good thought leadership that your users might find really helpful as they think about their strategies by using your product. And being able to file tickets really easy with support reps that with like a known SLA. Those are sort of 3, 4 big areas that we think about as helping customers help themselves.
Wow. And I'm sure the automation, especially at a time like this, is super helpful for customers themselves who are also dealing with everything that's going on. And from your experience, you know, what does it really take to retain happy customers even during these times? You know, what else have you know, should we be thinking about above and beyond to retain?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are lots of attributes and traits that I think about. I think about 3 things. I do think, you know, regardless of how amazing your customer experience is, obviously you have to have a great product. Like don't lose sight of your product. If that's subpar, or you're de-investing there for other areas, like that will show through. So obviously great product remains like a really important one. I think the other 2 that we have found, at least within our teams, has been really around that empathy and adaptability. Yeah, I think of empathy, it's not the same as sympathy. Empathy is like being able to put yourself in their shoes and help them problem solve without necessarily giving them everything, right? Like I mentioned earlier, we created a customer relief fund. We really created individualized sort of resources for CSMs to decide themselves how to work with customers on different discount methods. We didn't give customers like a blanket 2 months free. Like some companies did that, where they said, we're just going to give everyone 2 months free. We decided actually we want to make the most of this fund and really help those who needed it the most. And so that empathy piece was like knowing how to view the customer's business through their lens and really ask the right questions to understand where their pain points were and where we could help them most. So I do think that empathy piece is really important, but don't let yourself sort of give everything away, because at the end of the day, you're also running a business, right? You have to like survive yourself. And April, when this fell, like we had no idea what was going to happen on our end. That's a big one. And the second big one, I think at the moment we've all learned, is being adaptable. Adaptability is just so key. I think we're probably all burning out at this point from adaptability, but it's something that we're going to have to keep going, in 2021. So being willing to, put together a plan, put together a framework, but then revisit that framework regularly. When we put together our relief fund, we actually reviewed some of the rules on a daily basis as we were getting feedback from the floor of CSMs and then customers. We adjusted the discounts that we were offering, or the guardrails that we had in place, or even like some of the ceilings, because we were realizing that it wasn't quite the right message, or we weren't giving quite enough to this type of customer, and actually there were different ways, like different alternatives we could give them. So it really is about that adaptability piece is pretty important.
Be really flexible. And we've been talking about customer retention, and you mentioned earlier that customer retention leads to a lot more revenue, and it's actually really expensive to acquire new customers. Something that we haven't touched upon is, how do you inspire customers to refer more people? Word of mouth and referrals and adding more people to your network is one of the ways that the revenue grows by retention. So tell us more about that, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think the kind of inspire is like the key word in that question. Like it really is about getting your customers sort of fired up and excited. I've seen so many repeat customers that joined the company, found out about HubSpot because that company used HubSpot, used it for a few years, and then went on to other companies and actually like implemented HubSpot themselves at other companies. So and they talk to me and they are so excited about HubSpot. It's pretty amazing to see. So you definitely inspire customers by that that product piece again, and that customer experience. I think you have to have that sort of 360 experience for the customer. It's not just about when I talk to my CSM, I have a good experience. It's like when I interact with support, when I interact with the community, when I interact within the product, like there are notifications that I get in the product are helpful to me. They're not hassling me. Right? There's nothing worse when you have like 5 different million pop-ups in your product. We spend a lot of time at HubSpot thinking carefully about like, where do we put notifications? Is it a banner on top? Is it a pop-up window? Like that's something that we really want to think carefully about. To the content that you publish, like that experience from beginning to end has to be really pleasant and inspiring for the customer to actually want to refer their friends and family or peers to use your product. We, as you can imagine, we're a pretty big company. We have a bunch of different programs here to encourage referrals. One that I think sort of talks well to how we inspire our customers is our champion user program. So every quarter we select our top 1,000 users and we surprise them with a champion user certificate that they can like post on LinkedIn. They get a bunch of like cool swag, some great recognition. Like it's a real surprise for them and they just love it. And I mean, the amount of like engagement it creates on LinkedIn for us, like we get over 10,000 engagements and like thousands of like 1-minute impressions on LinkedIn. Like it's been a really successful program and it's actually a true moment of delight, right? We're just saying like, thank you for using HubSpot and for being a top user. It makes us happy. It makes them happy. Like it's just a win-win for everyone. So that's kind of a small example of how we encourage that referral piece.
That's amazing. And I've seen some of the LinkedIn posts myself. I'm, as you know, connected with HubSpot and HubSpot for Startups folks on your end, and absolutely loves seeing these celebratory posts. Was there a reason why you all decided to make that like a surprise for your customers instead of letting them know, if you use, X number of hours, or like, the top 1,000 customers will get this prize?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably it's a little bit better known now, so it might be less of a surprise. But honestly, I think part of it is like we're a big company, so it's not my team that does this program, so I don't want to speak too much for another team. But part of the way we work at HubSpot is we're a big company, but we do like to, you know, do new things and move pretty fast. When we have ideas, like going from idea to execution can actually be a pretty quick effort. And this was probably one of those that we, a couple of years ago, were like, hey, wouldn't this be a fun idea? And just sort of executed on it within a couple of weeks. And that's kind of how it came about. We've had that happen with other like programs. We put together a program last year where we actually gave every CSM a certain pot of money that they could use on their customers. They could use it any way they wanted. They couldn't like use it on a discount for product, but otherwise they could use it on any way they wanted, and they could use it on however many customers they wanted as well. And so we had some CSMs, like we had one startup that actually became a unicorn startup in that 6-month period. And so our CSM bought them a unicorn shaped cake, right?
Wow.
Like small things like that they had been sent to the office, where like, we just basically had some extra budget and were able to make this happen in a couple of weeks and surprise the CSMs with it. And then they could surprise their customers. And it's just kind of, being able to like, again, be adaptable and like see an opportunity, grasp it and move along with it is something that we try and keep doing at HubSpot despite our size.
Sounds like small but very, very thoughtful rewards, show empathy and make customers very happy. And you also touched upon the fact that, branding isn't just about, slides and color schemes, but it's really about being consistent with how you speak with customers and how they feel throughout the experience they have with every touch point they have with your team.
Mhm.
Um, let's kind of switch gears and talk about mistakes. So what are some common mistakes that you've seen amongst customer success teams that you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest mistake today that happens with CS teams is treating them still as like a center of expense rather than a growth center. We just published our annual state of service report recently, which is available on our website if you're interested. Lots of great data points, but one of the big ones is that about a third of service professionals that we surveyed still treat success as an expense rather than an area of growth. And I think that's really a kind of a limited way of looking at it, right? Like in HubSpot, our CS teams really drive success in terms of securing renewals, but also like upsell and cross-sell. So thinking about how do I use CS to drive like that upsell, that like cross-sell into another product, that referral program, and like selling to their peers. I think that's like a really important piece of CS, and that's how you fund your CS team, right? If you treat it as an expense, you're never going to invest properly. So I know when I think about that particular area, I think about a couple of mistakes that typically happens. One is sort of giving CSMs too much of a role of responsibility. So having that CS person not only drive product adoption, but also, be a support rep for some things, be a renewal manager for another thing, be an account manager, be a sales rep, right? If you give them like way too much to do, everything from like the real tactical, like technical troubleshooting to like really strategic, like upsell, cross-sell, that something's gonna fall off. And usually what falls off is a strategy piece, and they just stick to the troubleshooting piece. So I'd say that's a pretty big one. I'd say the second one, which may seem counter to my first point, but I've seen a lot of CS teams measure themselves solely on like CSAT or NPS scores because they want to make sure that like employee sentiment is high with CS. That's definitely a stat that you should be tracking. It's a really important one. It's one that we track with our teams. But I do think that actually CSMs have a real responsibility to play with like renewal dollars and upsell and cross-sell dollars. So you should definitely at least measure them on customer dollar retention and revenue retention. They might not be the ones driving the actual, quote signing, like you may have an account manager who helps you, or the sales rep might be there to help you. But if a CSM is doing their job and driving product adoption, the renewal and the upsell will come from that. And so you definitely should use those metrics to show the success of the CSM's work. And then the final one I would add is assuming that your CSM is pretty focused on product adoption, that they're being measured on customer dollar retention or rev retention, I definitely would think a lot about how, like, what activities are driving successful rev retention. We ourselves have been at fault of this. We, for many years, focused only on lagging indicators like retention. And that meant that when there was a problem, we only found out about it sort of too late. Like, once you're getting retention numbers, like a year has gone and you're actually seeing the impact that your strategies a year ago implemented. So finding which activities, like, is it a type of call that you have, a type of email that you send? Like, what are the activities that your CSMs are doing that's driving that successful retention? And make sure they're doing those like week in and week out, and they have a good rhythm to doing those with their customers, is definitely like the way to achieve the highest sort of success with your team.
Got it. Really, really great points. Constantly just thinking about different outcomes that were achieved through specific strategies that you've implemented. And speaking of strategies, it sounds like you're supporting customers and you're doing outreach with them, as well as some sort of troubleshooting at times. Can you tell us the difference between CS teams and support teams, just so that we kind of can get clarity?
Yeah, I'd say support teams are much more of a reactive, like, I have a technical problem, my product is not working, or, if you're a tech product and our product's not working, or I don't know how, like, I keep trying to do this and it won't work like it's supposed to work. That's really the support team's work. Like, there's a very clear, like, question and answer. Sometimes, there could be escalations if it's a product roadblock, or there's something like there's a billing and contract question that support can't help with, but it's really a reactive, like, frontline center. Our CSMs are much more on the proactive front. So in what we call our one to few model, a CSM would have a book of business, right? In my team, they have about 170 customers to their name, and their job is to develop and drive, like, relationships with their customers and meet with them regularly to talk about, what goals do you have with this product? How do we help you use HubSpot to drive those business goals? So they really get to know, their customers in terms of the everyday users. They get to know potentially the head of marketing or head of sales, or even the CEO in smaller companies, for example. And it is that proactive, regular communication where you're deepening your relationship, you're digging into projects. They're not doing the work for you as a customer, but they're there to, like, help advise you on the work you are doing and make it sort of better. I think these are not easy times to be a startup. I've sort of lived vicariously through my husband, and it's really exciting times to be a startup, but also scary. So just continuing to show that grit and resilience and sort of believe in what you're doing, I definitely think is kind of the way forward, but don't forget about customer experience and CSMs.